And that's why I came up with the book Thrive State, was it's actually all the research that how we live our life is medicine.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State podcast. I'm your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And today it is a very special day because tomorrow on April 11th, launching on April 11th, is the second edition of my book, Thrive State, Your Blueprint for Optimal Health, Longevity, and Peak Performance. Why did I write the second edition? Well, for three reasons. Reason number one is that I was looking back during the pandemic and I looked at the people who have gone through the pandemic but have been able to be resilient, not only against the virus, but resilient in their thought and mindsets. Then I looked at the people that ended up in the ICU at the hospital I was working at. How did some people get sick in long-haul COVID? What is the difference between these two populations? And how do we get ourselves in the state to be resilient, no matter what type of pressure or challenges comes at us? New content on that in the second edition. Reason number two was when I looked at the Thrive State, when I looked at the energy of healing, of optimal health, of peak performance, this vibration that we carry, I realized that the Thrive State does not only exist within us, but that the energy that we exude permeates through our teams, our families, and communities. And how once we actually achieve the Thrive State within ourselves, we become a catalyst of this energy into the communities that we are a part of. So the Thrive State advantage is really going from me to we. That's also new in the second edition. And lastly, we talk about the thing that keeps us back from becoming our best selves. You know, every single year, I know people make New Year's resolutions on the person that they want to be, the relationship they want to get into, or the finances they want to attract. Why do most people fail after they set out these resolutions? I go in deep into the science of the default mode network, or this primitive aspect of our consciousness and nervous system that is living through old programming that we carry when we are children. The beliefs and mindsets that we adopted from our parents, from our teachers, from schools, from media, the things that we learn within ourselves through the trauma that we might have experienced as children. And then that plays out over time in this programming that is in a place in our body called the default mode network. And unless we are conscious of this programming, we are making unconscious choices about how we live our life. And it's those choices and the subsequent actions that actually determine our health, our longevity, our relationships, our performance, everything. So can we become more conscious of the things that are unconscious in our life and start to make choices to become the real us, the most authentic version, the part of us that's connected to love? And if we could understand and see that, we begin to be able to make choices that are aligned with the highest parts of us. And I teach people a very simple framework to actually start making choices for you to become the best you, for you to be in Thrive State. So please, if that excites you, and if you have a first edition of the book, trust me, the new expanded second edition of Thrive State is going to be something you will want to have. It's a very exciting book. Pick up the second edition of Thrive State that launches on April 11th. If you're new to this podcast, welcome in. I am so excited that you have landed on this podcast and started to listen to this, and hope you get a copy of my book, because this is really about the tools, the techniques, the tactics of becoming the very best versions of us, to escape from stress, to escape from struggle, to escape from worry, to tap back into the very best versions of us that we have innately, to know that we are a part of divinity, to know that we are love and that we are safe. All this in the podcast, I share the thought leaders that has these ideas to bring us to the best you. So thank you for joining. And if you're a returning listener, thank you for making the show a success. We couldn't do it without you. And if you haven't already, please help the show grow by engaging, commenting on the podcast, subscribing to it, and sharing it with your friends and family. You could also do us a big favor by going to ratethispodcast.com/thrivestate and leaving us a 5-star review wherever you are listening to this podcast. Now, on today's episode, I actually share a conversation I had on another podcast called Inside the Inspired. It's actually a podcast that's hosted by Jonathan Cohen, somebody who reached out to me after listening to me on my podcast. And I share some insights there that I think people will find very valuable. I share insights to health, longevity, and performance that I don't talk about often, and our insights I think people will gain a lot from. Jonathan Cohen is an excellent host. This is a great conversation, particularly during the launch of the second edition of my book, Thrive State. Don't forget to pick up your copy at thrivestatebook.com, and please enjoy this conversation I have with Jonathan Cohen in Inside the Inspired.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Inspired. I am so fortunate right now to be in the presence of someone that I truly admire and respect as a professional, as a doctor, as an author, and as a fitness enthusiast. It is just immense to have a conversation with this individual, and I'm so humbled to introduce the author of Thrive State, Dr. Kien Vuu. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me and appreciate the flattering introduction.
It is easy, man. I can't lie. It's when you get the opportunity to ask someone like yourself questions, you got to jump on it. And I'm not going to waste any time. I know we're limited, so let's get right into it. So, Dr. V.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about your background and the whole concept of Thrive State?
Thrive State. Thrive State. Well, we'll talk about Thrive State first, and we'll go to the background. Thrive State is really a state of being. It's an energy that you feel within yourself. It's a frequency that's in your body. And that vibrational frequency goes out and other people feel it, but it also speaks to every single cell in your body, speaking to your DNA in every single moment, controlling your biology, performance, and longevity. Now, how did I come to Thrive State, or how did I start to learn about it? Well, I was not in a Thrive State. I was in a stress state. I am a doctor that was trained in interventional radiology, which is minimally invasive surgery. And about 6 years ago, I was overweight, diabetic, had high blood pressure, and I was on prescription medications. An MD who was trained at the National Institutes of Health, trained at UCLA, trained at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, had all this Western traditional medical training, but yet I didn't have the tools to be well. And if I continued down that route of traditional medicine only, I'm not saying it's bad, but if I continued only on that path, it would be more medications, higher doses. And that's how most people in America, once they come to a place where they're stressed, they'll end up with more medicines and potentially surgery. And that's where I was in my life. And how did I get to that point? This is where some of the more sort of, I would say, spiritual aspects of my awakening, told me, in terms of like just tapping into who we are authentically as people is actually medicine. And that's how I use to kind of cure my diseases. So let's back up to my story a little bit. I was actually not born in this country. I was born in Vietnam. After the Vietnam War, I was actually on a refugee boat for 8 months, a Philippine refugee camp for 3 months, and then our family was sponsored to America by a Catholic church. And I remember, as a child, you would think, oh, okay, a kid who just went through all this adversity would be so grateful to grow up in America. Well, not this kid. This kid was ashamed of his parents who couldn't speak English. This kid was ashamed of living in a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 of his uncles and very, very small quarters. This kid was very embarrassed to walk to school with hand-me-down clothes, with holes basically in my pants and in my shoes. This kid was ashamed of the food that I took to school that stunk to everybody else. I was that kid, and I think many people resonate with my story because they resonate with a part of themselves that didn't feel good to be themselves, just who they are. That they were told by the outside world that you need to be XYZ to be happy, that you need, you know, ABC to feel success, and it's outside of you. And that's what I did over the course of my time was I really felt not worthy, not enough. And I remember constantly wanting to put on this mask to protect those wounds inside. And so I remember I was like one of the very few people in my elementary school. I grew up in Chinatown, LA, where most of the people you either spoke with a Mexican accent or a thick Chinese accent. And they said, God damn it, I'm going to speak like Sean Connery so I would not sound like a floppy Chinese guy. So I remember changing my voice, and then throughout high school, it was about trying to get the best grades just to feel loved or worthy, having a sense of humor so I could be funny to people. And it was all striving, for these things in my life that I thought would bring me love and bring me more success. And so I climbed the ranks, medical school, residency. I went to the top residency at UCLA, only to discover I was constantly chasing. And to the point where I got that part that I was supposed to have success, attending doctor, chief of my hospital in interventional radiology, convertible Porsche, $2 million house that I lived in by myself. That was also the time I was overweight, diabetic, had high blood pressure, and on prescription medications. And so it was basically from this person that was born with love, and I believe we all are, that we have our own internal vibration that is natural. But we get told by the world not to be that. And we start covering up that with the pains and the traumas in our life and being somebody else, that we give our bodies these stress signals. And, when you feel stressed out, you're not going to sleep well, you're not going to eat well, you're not going to move well, you're not going to have community, and you're going to create these stressful signals that go to your cells. And when your cells get those stressful signals, inflammation will go up, your immune system will go down. That will put you prone to getting chronic symptoms and then chronic disease. I really did a deep dive on nutrition, on epigenetics. I looked around the world to see where people live the longest. And here's the funny thing. They didn't have access to medications, the stem cells, to all these technologies that allowed them to live so long. There were very basic tenets of how to be a good human being. Moving every day, eating real food, having deep connection with other people, and just serving as you. And so I started to study all their different elements. And then I looked at the molecular biology as to, okay, what does nutrition do to your DNA? What does exercise do to your DNA? Oh my God, it actually makes changes that improve your health. And that's why I came up with the book Thrive State, was it's actually all the research that how we live our life is medicine. And when I finally understood that, and as I'm doing the work, and I'm constantly doing the work of rediscovering myself, finding myself, remembering who I am, that I myself am love. It is that love vibration, which is the Thrive State vibration, that is giving me, I've lost the weight, I'm in optimal health, and my lab test, it shows that I biologically age backwards as well. So that's a little nugget of my story there.
There's so much to unpack there, and the humility that comes along with your story is immense, where you recognize the lack of purpose almost, and then you set on this journey to go create one. So as you went through this journey, these different phases, and you talk about it in your book, how we live our life is medicine.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that statement and how it relates to the Thrive State?
Absolutely. Well, when I started to study people in the blue zones, so it's a famous book by Dan Beutner, who is this social biologist. He's a cyclist. He's a world Guinness record holder for cycling, and he's a documentarian. And so he traveled around the world to reverse engineer aging and disease. And he found 5 locations where people were just living really long. Loma Linda, California, of all places, Costa Rica, Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia, Italy, and Nigeria in Greece. And he started to study how they were living so long. And he basically came up with 9 tenets of why people were living so long. I mean, in essence, they were moving every day. They were eating natural food. They didn't stuff themselves with food. They had a sense of purpose, and they all had community. And I was like, oh, wow, these are just ways of living life that gave them life. The thing is, in his book, it was more of a sociological data set. I wanted to know, does living that way actually translate to the biochemistry and molecular biology of our cells? And so I did studies on the very same things: sleep, nutrition, movement, our mindsets, our emotions, our community, and our sense of purpose. Does it change the way our DNA is being expressed? And absolutely it does. And so how we live our life, how we show up every single day, the perspective that we have on things, right? The meaning that we give to things can either make us feel great or it can tear us apart. The focus that we have on the things in our life, the things we have versus the things we don't have, the things we can control versus not. Every single choice that we make changes the vibrational energy of our being. And as I stated before, the vibrational energy of our being does not only affect the people around us, it affects every single cell in our body. So at every single moment, based on the choices that you make, you are giving signals to your cells. So how we live our life, the choices that we make, actually create the signal we give to ourselves and the signal that we give around the world. So if we live our life remembering to make a choice to just create a beautiful life, do you want to argue with your spouse? Do you want to be triggered by somebody cutting you off on the freeway? Do you really want to put that piece of cheesecake in your body? Now, don't get me wrong. I eat cheesecake. I'm just not going to do it all the time, and it better be worth it. You know what I mean? So everything comes down to choices. So we start to understand that every single choice leads to an action and habit that creates the vibration of energy that we give to ourselves and the people around the world. We will understand that how we live our life is actually medicine, or it could be poison.
It's so refreshing to hear a practicing medical doctor talk about health and wellness and live the lifestyle truly to its utmost potential. And my kind of curiosity around this, as a athlete myself, I consider myself an athlete just based on my output. But I also have my professional life, and you talk about all the choices that we make on a daily basis. How can people kind of wrestle with the notion that this is all lovey-dovey relative to, cellular happiness? And you did a really good job in your book about distinguishing between the two, when it
Mhm.
does come down to the choices. But, how do you recommend or really touch the soul of an individual who's wrestling with this whole, it's okay to be, body positivity, if you will, almost
Mhm.
to an extreme and at the expense of being controversial or fault? How do we, wrap our heads around that concept and start to deliver the message in a way that's palatable and actionable?
Got it. I heard a couple of questions in there. So let's dive through each a little bit. Can you give me
Thank
one
you.
direct question in terms of what you wanted to know? Are we addressing the body composition and positivity kind of question, or why don't you give me one direct question, because I got lost in the mix there.
Sure. So what I'm trying to ask is, how can people see through all of the positivity and not get lost in all the information that's out there and not necessarily find it to be too lovey-dovey and actually take some steps towards making themselves better?
Oh, are you basically saying there's a lot of kind of woo-woo, lovey-dovey information that's
Yes.
out there, and how do they sift that to find the information to actually make changes in their life?
Yes.
Because is your premise that a lot of information that's out there is just woo-woo and just sort of like not really doesn't really have any scientific basis or something like that.
My point is, I believe that the larger audience believes that.
Mm-hmm.
And my goal is to circumvent that premise.
Got it. Yeah, there's certainly a lot out there. There's certainly a lot out there that will that's only existing on the web to grab your attention. So it might be a little bit of hyperbole, all the information that is out there. And I gotta say that if you're in a stress state, you are more acclimated and prone to just stay on your phone, to look through the stuff and sift and not be present and aware of who you are. So I just gotta say, the following is time to yourself and space to yourself is so important. And if you don't have a few moments in your day where you can just pause and take 10 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth, like you're blowing through a straw very slowly. And when we have that long exhale, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system. That's when you're still. In that stillness, you can ask yourself some questions. Am I healthy? Am I happy? How am I feeling? Many people don't know. People are just kind of stressed out all the time, and they don't really know. And I could say that if you don't feel that sense of calm and peace and happiness and health in your life, are there things that are out there that you resonate with? Is there somebody that you feel who is speaking to you and you're just like, I'm vibing that. There's some truth in that. Versus you'll also feel certain things, or like when somebody says things and they're like very, I don't know, woo woo or they're saying things, you resonate with them, but you're resonating with them in a way that's like negative, like, oh, it doesn't make me feel good about myself. They look so good, they look so healthy, but the way they say it just doesn't make me feel good about myself. And I could just say, as you start to trust your intuition with the information that's out there, the information that speaks truth to you, you're going to feel it, you're going to sense it. And then with that, you can slowly take little tiny steps on, to each one of the choices that you make every single day to start making a new choice, that's more aligned with the person that you are.
It's a great take on a very complicated question. So I appreciate you rounding it out for me. In your book, you talk about having a strong sense of purpose. And you mentioned that our purpose is ourselves. Your purpose is you, as you put it.
Yeah.
And you bring up the concept of eudaimonia.
Yeah.
Can you explain the concept and how it relates to health and well-being?
This episode of the Thrive State podcast is brought to you by the Thrive State Accelerator. The Thrive State Accelerator is actually a home course that I developed using the exact same techniques I work with my celebrity clients, CEOs, and executives on how to get them to the Thrive State. The Thrive State Accelerator teaches you how to master your 7 bioenergetic elements. That's sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional mastery, relationships, our thoughts and mindset, as well as purpose. In this Thrive State Accelerator, you're also going to get a bonus module on optimization. That's how I talk about supplementation, peptides, all the optimization techniques I use with my clients to get them to the Thrive State. Now, for some of you who are just joining us for the first time, you guys might be wondering, what is the Thrive State? Well, the Thrive State is actually the energy, the epigenetic environment we give to ourselves, telling our DNA how to act and how to respond. And if we want optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, if we can master these 7 bioenergetic elements, our ability to have those 3 things that we just said, optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, is at its greatest. And it also prevents you from getting chronic symptoms like brain fog, being overweight, feeling sluggish, acne, pain, all these chronic symptoms, as well as preventing you from getting chronic disease. So getting to that Thrive State is really getting to that state to master being that very best version of yourself so you could show up for you, for your family, for your business, everything that's important to you. So go ahead, check it out right now at kienvuu.com/accelerator and use coupon code podcast25 for 25% off. Now back to the podcast.
Oh, absolutely. So eudaimon. So there's different type of happiness that's out there. There's hedonic happiness, which is the pleasure that you get with things like a car, a money, a house, or whatever. Those type of things. That's hedonic type of happiness. There are other authors that talk about when you got hedonic happiness, what will happen is you'll get the thing that makes you happy, and you almost have to up level it for you to continue to stay happy. So there's that hedonic adaptation. So that's hedonic happiness. Then we've got eudaimonic happiness. Eudaimonic happiness is the happiness you feel when you feel like you're connected to something bigger, when you're part of something, when you belong to something, when you could serve yourself to something. So that's the happiness that's associated with purpose. And there's actually several different studies that compare these two type of happinesses. One is from a colleague of mine at UCLA, Stephen Cole, that studied people that were primarily hedonically happy versus people that had eudaimonic happiness. And what he found was this: the people that had eudaimonic happiness, there was a gene sequence that got turned off. This is the stressful gene sequence. So when you had a sense of purpose, that thing got turned off. And what happens when that thing gets turned off? It lowers your inflammation, it increases your immunity, and they have a longer life. The people with hedonic happiness, it's funny. They noticed that there was a slight increase in inflammation in those people and a slight decrease in immunity. So, it might show that people who are out for hedonistic type of happiness and pleasures tend to be a little bit more in the stress state versus the people who are in the eudaimonic or have purpose in the thrive state. There are also studies done by Barbara Fredrickson. Oh, it was the Barbara Fredrickson. No, I'm forgetting her name. It's Barbara something. She wrote the telomere effect. She won the Nobel Prize in for discovering telomerase. So telomeres are basically the end caps of your DNA that protect your DNA from fraying every time a cell divides. And it's a cellular marker for longevity. And what they noticed was people that had eudaimonic happiness had more preserved telomeres. And there are also additional studies that demonstrate that people that have a deep sense of purpose live 7 years longer. So why is that the case? And this is my theory now, is the thing that I think puts people in the stress state and the thing that I was in before is this programming and ego. I was someone that was not worthy, not enough. And so my old programming, my ego said I was not enough. I need success. I need a house and a car to be worthy. So that ego was driving, and the ego is always looking to survive, right? And so the ego is always chasing for success, chasing for that thing, and always wanting to protect itself. And you're in survival mode. And what happens when you're in survival mode? You have a lot of stress. And what happens when you have a lot of stress? Inflammation goes up, immunity goes down. That gives you chronic symptoms, chronic disease. But when you are just yourself, and when you're like, dude, I just want to give to you what I got, you're telling your body, I'm good. I'm not stressed out. I got more than enough. You basically turn off the survival program and you're telling your body, I'm good. And when you tell your body that, you're giving it the thrive state signals that, hey, we can grow, we can heal, we are not in danger. When you lead with your ego, you're basically telling you that the saber-toothed tiger is chasing you all the time and you run the stress hormones. When you say that I just want to serve, I'm good, what it's telling your body is you're safe. So let's heal, let's repair, and let's give you everything for peak performance. So purpose is very important.
It almost comes down, and this is my own deduction, and pardon me if
Yeah,
I'm misquoting or
yeah.
deducing improperly. It's this concept of cellular happiness to a degree. And
I like
it
that. You should hashtag that cellular happiness. Yeah. Mhm.
honestly, I got it from your work, and it's really cool to see how it's evolved. And so you have these 7 different bioenergetic factors.
Yeah.
And while we don't necessarily have time, everyone should go pick up a copy of Thrive State so they can delve more deep into each of these 7 factors. The factor that I'm most curious about right now, and I think
Mhm.
over the last couple of years with the evolution of biotech and all these resources that are out there, Apple's developing more technology for more internal transparency. But you have products out there like Whoop that primarily focus on recovery.
Mhm.
You're an athlete yourself. So, how are you finding your recovery practices relative to all the technologies that are out there? Do you find that there is a gap in the effectiveness, or is it a tool worth picking up and seeing through?
Right. I would probably say this as it turns out to for technology. One, I think technology is great. It gives us trends, it gives us some data for us to follow. The things I don't like about technology is it's not always available to everybody that's out there. Some technologies are going to be very expensive, in terms of diagnostic technologies and technologies that are, part of treatment. It's great. Don't get me wrong. I love them. But I don't want to give people the false sense that if you don't have money and you can't afford certain technologies, you can't be good. And there's certain limitations to technologies as well. I could tell you that with many of the trackers that are there, whether they're tracking your sleep, whether they're tracking your blood sugars, they're not all that accurate. They're anywhere from 30 to 70% accurate. What they're good for is telling you trends. Like, okay, I was better here versus that other day. And it'll kind of give you some trends so you have some data to be able to say, oh man, you know what? I drank before I had alcohol or before I went to bed, but when I woke up, my blood sugars were sky high, and my device said that I didn't sleep as well. It gives you a little bit of data. I got to say the following: I lose things all the time. I've lost 5 Aura rings. I've lost 2 Apple Watches, and so now I don't carry anything only because I lose things all the time. But here's the thing, when you know the 7 things that I think are most important to you and you get dialed down pretty well, you could start to say, man, I just didn't feel that good today or didn't have that energy. What changed? You could start to ask yourself some of those questions. So I think that technologies will get better. It will help people make little tiny adjustments here and there. I think currently, I know some people are so glued to their technology and watches that they stress out. They'll wake up when they're supposed to feel refreshed and like, oh my God, my sleep percentage is only 63%. That sucked. Why? And they go into the stress state, believing these technologies that are, not very accurate in the first place. And I say to those people, they're good for identifying trends. They're not necessarily, and certainly I'm not using very much of them now. I did before. I did use them, to some degree to kind of like, give me a general idea as to how my body responds. I used to have a continuous glucose monitor. I used to have an Oura ring. I used to have an Apple Watch. I just end up losing them all the time. So I think they're going to continue to iterate and become better and be a part of our world. But I certainly want to let people know they're not necessary for you to get you to your optimal self.
So, I'd like to kind of talk about work culture for a second.
Yeah, sure.
You're a doctor, you've gone through years and years of training, and also probably haven't slept that much through that period of your life.
Well,
In fact, I know you didn't sleep that much because I read your book.
mhm.
So, how do we kind of combat this culture of, sleep is for the weak and recognize that, maybe it's not?
Well, absolutely. I'm just going to tell people sleep is not for the weak. We all need it. We, as human beings, require sleep for us to be at our very best. And, if you're younger, you can probably get through the next day thinking that things aren't changed. But this stuff is cumulative. And so if you don't sleep now, it's going to catch up to you at some point. And you'll either be, slapped in the face with disease or poor energy or some kind of physical ailment or brain fog or something like that, when you're not getting your sleep. So how do we change that? I think there's enough people talking about it now where I think people understand. I think Ariana Huffington wrote a book. In fact, I think the name of that book might be Thrive. I'm not sure, but it might be Thrive, not Thrive State. But I think in that book, she talks about sleep and how, she was just hustling, didn't get any sleep until she finally, passed out. It is a requirement. It is necessary, which is why it is the first bioenergetic element that, of the 7 that I described. It's so important to regulate your circadian rhythm, your health, and how your hormones and how you function. And I think, how do we combat that? We combat that by letting them know the impact of poor sleep as it pertains to health and ultimately your performance. And two, just really letting people know that when you get a good night's sleep, you're going to be at your best. So if you need to be in front of the camera, if you need to be on front of the stage, if you're taking a test, you need that sleep to be, fully functional. So I would probably say to all the people in the workplaces, if you want your people to perform at your best, if you want your organism of work to be at its best, you need to rest your people.
There's also this evolving field and awareness around toxic heavy metals
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and the place that it has in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak about how you see toxic heavy metals playing a role in our lives, if any?
Yeah, well, I mean, the body reacts, every single individual, it will react differently to heavy metals, but heavy metals is something that can be stored in your body for a long time and cause health habits. I would probably say the two biggest sources in terms of a toxic heavy metal would be mercury, and the two sources that give the most mercury would be mercury fillings. I had all my mercury fillings removed because that's one source, and the other thing is eating large fish. We're talking about sea bass, we're talking about tuna and things like that. Tony Robbins recently had, a big hole burned in his esophagus and passed out on stage at one of the events because he had mercury poisoning. So it exists. And then you've got, other heavy metals that are around as well. So certainly if you're starting to feel tired or you get some symptoms that just aren't explained by optimizing the 7 things I talked about in my book, and you're still not feeling very well, then you might want to see a doctor to get some more functional medicine testing, which will include heavy metals.
So the other concept that you allude to a lot, and another doctor that I'm a fan of, Dr. Peter Itzia,
Mhm.
is who's we'll call him a longevity expert.
Thanks for putting us on the same platform there. I appreciate it.
Hey man, call it like I see it. He talks about life relative, the life relative to the performance
Yeah.
on this curve, where
Hmm.
his whole premise is about being a badass 100-year-old.
Yeah. Hmm.
In terms of how your 7 factors relate to becoming that badass 100-year-old, could you speak about what you believe to be the most important, where people can start?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, where people could start. Well, one, recognize that the 7 things that I listed in my book are really the scientifically proven things that have the most positive effect on your health and your DNA. And so, where do you start? Well, I put things in each one of these 7 factors that you might start with, but really start with the thing that's going to be easiest for you. For us to bring on a new habit or make a new choice, it has to be easy for us. If we find it to be very difficult, we don't have enough activation energy to start. So whatever it might be, if it's going to be like turning off blue light, a couple hours before bed, if it's going to be getting some early morning sunshine, is it going to be, putting some shoes right next to your bed so you can grab them so that you could take off and exercise first thing in the morning. Whatever it is for you, it's just doing one thing first and doing the easiest thing first to get started. And I think it's really just unwrapping each one of those things slowly to get back to that. But I would probably say his is more physical, which I completely agree because I believe people don't move normally. People are sitting all day and they're not, the exercises that they're doing, if they're weight training, it's all about weights and muscle. It's not functional movement. And so when you're thinking about as you're getting older, you want to be playing with your grandkids on the floor, you got to be able to work on very functional movements, like nice squats, getting up and down from a chair and things like that, working on your grip strength. That's important. I think for me, I'd say the most important thing, and it's a constant work because I haven't mastered it, is rediscovering who I really am. Rediscovering that in every single moment in our life, unless we're falling off a 30-story building or if there's actually a saber-tooth tiger next to you, outside of those 2 instances, actually, even in those 2 instances, although those are really, really scary states, but there is love in every moment, and there is love in you in every single moment. And anything that has you perceive or not have you perceive that love is some kind of human conditioning that's layered on top of you. That type of human conditioning potentially can make you perceive the world in a way that's already kind of scary and whatnot, which is not true. So if you continue to just work on those different layers of trauma, of old conditioning, of old teachings, of things that are not you, so that you could find you again, and just remember that. And I think this is a lifelong process that we'll never really get to. But the more you do that work, the more you are aware that you are really in control of every single choice that you make. Because if you're not aware of that, you're running on this ego, this old programming. And if you're running on ego and old programming, you're not the ones really making choices and decisions. That's where I find people fail the most is, oh man, I should be doing this, but something's stopping me. The thing that's stopping you is the old programming. So you have to do the work to uncover that. And breath work has been one of those things that have been transformative for me to be able to unpack some of that and to get back to the love vibration.
I couldn't agree more with you on that premise. Breathwork has been an immense tool in my own personal life where I've actually, the previous expert that I had on was Dr. Dmitry Polikov, who spends the entire time talking about nasal breathing. And I know we only have a couple minutes left, so I got one more question for you, Dr. V.
Yeah.
If you had to offer yourself some advice to get to that version of yourself 10 years from now, what do you think he would tell you?
Okay, so me going back in time giving myself advice, or me, a future me coming in now to give me future advice, or the me now
Future
giving me
you.
advice?
Future
Future
you?
me comes back. All right, okay. Yeah. The future me will fly into my life right now and look me in the eye and just say, Kien, you are nothing but love. Everything that you think you want or need to do, you don't, because you have it right there. Begin to unpeel the lenses that don't have you see love and recognize the abundant amount of love that is currently in your life right now, and tap into that in every single moment. That's what he would tell me.
Dr. V, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. This has been an immense half hour. Turns out you were right about this 40-minute timer, so we got a minute and a half left. I'm just going to tell you real quick that next weekend I'm actually doing 1,000 pull-ups for an organization called the Friendship Circle. In discovering your work and following through, it's reassured me about all the practices that I've implemented until now, and also given me tools to continue to seek that higher version of myself. The goal is to complete it in 3 hours and raise an exorbitant amount of money. In the past, I've run 50 miles, raised $15,000 towards curing Alzheimer's, done 1,000 push-ups in an hour. And again, these are all practices that stem from your teaching. So I really do appreciate this. Thank you so much. Where can everybody find you?
They can find me on Instagram, all over social media at Dr. V, that's spelled out DOCTOR VMD. So follow me there, or you can go to my website, kienvuu.com.
Thank you so much, sir.
You got it, my friend.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if this podcast is bringing a lot of value to you, if you find that your life is just improving with this podcast, that your life is getting to the next level, please consider supporting it. And here's a few ways you can do so. You can do so by liking this video and commenting on this video, and also sharing this video with your friends and family. Another thing you can do is go to ratethispodcast.com/ThriveState. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star review there. It will really, really help this show grow. And this will give me more time so that I could actually give more content to you, just like you got in this episode. And if you haven't already picked up a copy of my book, Thrive State, Your Blueprint for Optimal Health, Longevity, and Peak Performance, you can pick it up now. It became a #1 new release in longevity. Go to thrivestatebook.com. And if you enjoy the book, please consider leaving us a review as well. And the last thing you can do if you're liking everything here and you want to work more closely with me as well as my team to get you into the Thrive State, go to kienvuu.com/accelerator and consider joining the home course, the Thrive State Accelerator. It's really the course that I use. It's the concepts that I use personally when I work with CEOs, celebrities, and my high-profile clients to get them to the Thrive State. Again, the Thrive State Accelerator at kienvuu.com/accelerator. And because you're a listener of this podcast, I want you to save 25% by using the coupon code podcast25. I hope we continue to give value to you. And remember always, you are your best medicine.